Yes, sir.
Cool. So basically, yeah, as Aniva pointed out, we will be discussing design for product managers in this 1 hour session. And thanks for the detailed introduction. I'll just skip this. Aniba already mentioned everything. I have been a UX designer previously, and then I moved on to work as a product manager. In this session, we'll basically cover the three concepts. One is usability, what is usability and how we can take care of usability. Second is design thinking, and third is heuristic evaluation. One thing I would like you to keep in your minds while all the three topics is uh, whenever we are designing for someone, just keep in mind that we are designing for a particular set of users to solve some of their pain points so that they achieve some goal. So this is the basic thing which we should keep in mind while we are designing any product. Okay. So let's start with the first topic, which is usability concepts. So first of all, to begin with, what actually is usability? So basically, when we say usability, we are trying to see how easy is it for the users to use the product. So how well can the users interact with the product and achieve the goal which they wanted to achieve by using the product. Okay. So, but how do you say that a product is a usable or non-usable? So for that, we have some quality markers which we can take help of. Some of these, the majority of these are these five. First being learnability. So whenever a user is presented with a new system or a new product, what happens is there is always a learnability curve. Okay. Now, for a product which is good, this particular learnability curve is smaller. Okay. So, so basically, what I mean to say is, by seeing a product or while interacting with the product, the user themselves understand how to use the product, how to achieve the goals they want to achieve through the product. Second is efficiency. Efficiency is basically how easy does the product make the user achieve the goal. How efficient does it make the user to achieve a particular goal for which he is using that product. Okay. Third is memorability. So once a user has learned how to use the product, let's say I have you, for example, just as an example, let's say I've used Google Slides for the first time. Now I made this presentation. I learned how to use Google Slides. Let's say I came back for the second time to use Google Slides after 1 month back. So it should not be that for a good product, it should not be that I am again going through that learnability curve. So a user a product should be such that once the user has learned how to use it, it should stay in his memory, and the next time when he comes, he doesn't need to relearn every time. Okay. The next thing is error prevention. There are certain type of errors which can happen while the user is interacting with the product. I'll cover this part in later in the slides. How can a system prevent that error to happen is something which a designer and a product manager needs to take care of while designing a product. And the last is satisfaction. After using the product, does the user gain a sense of satisfaction? Was he able to achieve the goal he was behind? Was he able to achieve the goal? He was behind in a faster way, or in a lesser cognitive with a lesser cognitive load, that is in a bit hassle free way. So these are few quality components of usability. Now, the thing is, how do we boost these quality components for a product? There are certain what we can say is certain ways through which we can boost these quality components in a product, and I'll cover a few of those. it is not an exhaustive list, but most of the times these components or particular concepts will help you in designing a good product. So let's start with the first one, which is basically affordance. So when let's say you saw a product for the first time, okay, now uh, when you are seeing it for the first time, you have to understand how to use the product. So affordances are basically the non-verbal communications which the product provides to the users, and these communications are something which the user would have already learned in his experiences prior to using the product. Okay, and these needs to be properly discoverable to the user. Okay, for an example, here in the screenshot we see this is our Gmail in our Android app. Okay, now let's say if a user wants to go to, let's say, start section, or let's say trash or send section, then uh, a user who is coming to the first time, there will be some learnability curve. Okay, so what happens is once we see this hamburger menu icon, we know that through this hamburger menu icon we already have a prior knowledge by using other apps that this is a standard concept which is used for uh, for going through other parts of the app. So clicking on the hamburger menu will basically open up a menu from which the user can go to other parts of the app. So this is one of the examples of affordance. There can be other examples also. Like here, the example was by using the standards which are already there in the industry. The other example can be by adding some kind of constraints. Okay. So for example, when you when on the mobile device, when you when you try to increase or decrease the brightness of uh, the screen, now there is a constraint that that slider can move only horizontally. Okay, so the user understands that I can only slide it horizontally and not move it like this in a vertical fashion or in a diagonal fashion. Okay, so constraints also help in creating affordances in certain ways. So basically, through affordance, it helps in decreasing the length of the learnability curve for the user and make the system more efficient for the user. The next is natural mapping. So let's take example of these two images. So let's consider that these are the gas stoves. Okay. If I try to rotate this, if I turn on this particular knob by moving it in an anti-clockwise direction, for example, okay, then can you identify which of the four stoves will get on? It is very difficult, right? Because we don't have any association with each with or any one-to-one mapping with a stove and a regulator, right? But when we come to this particular image, we can see that these are structured in a manner that 1, 2, 3, 4, and similar alignment is there in the regulators also. So if I turn on this regulator, we will see that this particular stove, we will understand that this particular stove will only get on, not any one of the other three. So this is a concept which is called natural mapping, where we try to arrange the items or arrange the different components of a product in a certain way so that the user understands. Basically, the user understands that on performing some action, what change will happen. Okay. So, for example, in Swiggy, if we have add button with with each row of the product itself, so clicking on the add button here will add this particular item into the cart or the basket, and will not add any other item to the basket. So this is one of the examples how it helps in the digital world. The next is metaphors. So when we are talking about when we are talking about let's say digital objects or any physical objects also, we can't write every user action on the interface itself. Okay, so sorry, so basically we can't write any every individual action item in the interface itself. So metaphors are a way to basically use the knowledge which again the user would already have, and then using that knowledge into the system to make the user understand, clicking on let's say a save icon, what will happen, or clicking on this indentation icon, what alignment icon, my bad, this particular alignment icon, what will happen. Now the thing is that we need to use these metaphors very wisely. Okay, as I said, uh, we always have to keep who is the user of the product. Okay, so let's say if I show this particular floppy icon to a person who was let's say born after 2005, he won't understand that this is a save icon. Okay, because floppy as a concept itself was no longer in much usage after or during 2005. Okay, but if we show them these particular icons, they will understand because they have been using these particular icons in other apps also. Okay, so this is something which we can exploit also, but we need to exploit very wisely. The next is consistency. So let's say you came to the app. Let's say you came to Flipkart for the first time. Okay, you opened the any product page. You liked the product. You added the product to the cart by clicking on this add to the cart. Then you went to some other page where you saw this particular widgets. Okay, and you again see add to cart button here. Now, in your head, what will happen is uh, you think that clicking on add to cart will again add the item to the cart. Okay. Now, this is how the users generally think. Okay. So that's why it is better to see to it that your actions inside a particular product are very consistent with what two things are, with what users mental model is. Second, a particular action should be same across the app. It should not happen that clicking on add to cart will perform one action here and will perform another action here. That thing should not happen. Okay. The other thing is keeping the consistent copy of these call to actions also help the user again learn the app, learn the product very faster. So basically, if let's say the other option which we can keep is move to cart or add item. Okay, so these are some other call to actions which we can keep. But now the user needs there is a cognitive load for the user that for two different call to actions, the same action will happen. So again, there will be some more learnability curve to understand that particular uh, new call to action which is surface in front of the customer. Now sometimes what happens is due to some constraints again, or due to some appropriate scenarios, we need to break the consistency also. So one example is for security concerns. Okay, so for example, generally in the buy now pay later constructs, whenever you are using a buy now pay later construct for the first time in a device, the device asks for an OTP. Okay, but whenever you are using it later, the device will not ask for an OTP. Okay, so this is an example where we are breaking the consistency in the user flow. So there can be some other reasons also, but security has been one of the major reasons where consistency has takes a hit sometimes. The next thing is recognition over recall. So let's say a user has seen Microsoft PowerPoint once and he has interacted with the this design tab. Okay, so he has let's say applied this particular design here. Now, whenever let's say a user comes back after and prepares a slide, then he wants to see which design will fit best for his slide. He can again come here. He can browse over these and can see how the design is looking. He doesn't need to put a cognitive load on imagining how the designs will look after applying these templates. Second, uh, instead of let's say showing these templates as thumbnails, there would be let's say some names of the templates which are given to these templates. If we write those names directly, then the user needs to think that which was the template I used last time, and which among these eight was that, and then he will have to check one by one, or he will have to either uh, remember which one among those was it. Okay, so it is always better to make the customer or the user recognize what actually he had done earlier, or recognize what will happen if he takes particular action, and not make him recall that I did this earlier, and clicking on this will take me to this. Okay, so it is always preferred that we use some paradigms which are already the user is which is already aware of the user, uh, so that the user understands key what will happen if I perform a certain action. The next thing is anticipation. A good designer and a good product manager always should always try to anticipate what the user might need at any point of his user journey. Okay, we'll cover this part again in the design thinking process. So we should understand what would be the new need, or an existing need which could come up in a which should come up to a user at a particular phase in his or her user journey. For example, let's say you write a Microsoft doc. Okay, now you clicked on save. You tried to save it. Let's say you are saving it on desktop. Now you realize that I'll have to add it in a in a folder. I will make new more docs, and I'll add all these to that folder. Okay, so there are two options now. One, you do cancel here and go to minimize the Google Doc and go to desktop, and then create a new folder. Okay, that is one way. Second, you anticipate that user might has this need while he is trying to save a particular Google Microsoft Doc. At that point of time, give him an option in save as dialog box itself to create a new folder, allow him to rename it, and uh, allow him to save the file in that new folder. So this basically decreases the length of user journey, making the product more efficient than it was before. The next thing is slips and lapses. It is a part of the error prevention which I was earlier talking about. So basically, slips are failures which could have been done due to execution, and lapses are the failures which basically someone was doing something and then he totally forgot about the overall goal. Okay, so for example, uh, one of the example of the lapses is you try to uh, you try yeah so for example, you went to an ATM to withdraw cash. Okay, you withdrew the cash and then you forgot your ATM card inside the ATM itself. That is one of the example of lapses. Okay, slip is when where we are seeing that user tried to execute something but he failed in that execution. For example, when we try to drag and drop into attachment into a let's say our Gmails. Okay, in that case, if we drag and drop it somewhere outside that particular drop box, it will not the action will not execute. So that is one slip, which one example of a slip. Okay. Now, how do we so preventing slips is basically is a function of the uh, some strategies which we have already talked in the previous slides, making the product more effective such that the user will basically be able to achieve his goals. For lapses, there are few additional things which we should keep in mind, that the user basically uh, doesn't forget what he was doing. So for that, keep the process as short as possible. Put minimum interruptions in the process. Have some forcing functions. By forcing functions, I mean do certain action, after that do another action. Okay. Then disable illegal components commands, sorry, as in, if let's say if a user hasn't filled a full form, the save button should save or submit button should be disabled for him. Okay. And have an auto save and undo always there. Auto save always there, and have an option to undo. Auto save, for example, let's say you are again working on a Google Doc, and your internet goes off. That should not make it uh, that the user loses his work. An automatic save will help it save to the drive itself. And undo, because if a user does something by mistake, he can always undo the actions. The second type of error which can happen is mistakes. So mistakes happen when the user is aware that I need to do something to achieve a goal, but during that process he does something wrong. Okay. Now, how do we prevent those mistakes is something we should give proper feedback to the user at each point of his user journey. For example, while filling a form, a certain field is mandatory, put an asterisk over that field so that user understands that this is a mandatory field. Again, have an undo option so that if user does any mistake, he can go back to the previous state. Okay. Have a meaningful error message. So for example, let's say you are trying to load a app and the app doesn't load. Okay. Now in this particular image, in the left one, let's say this pop-up comes for the user. In that case, user doesn't understands what happened to the app. Okay. But let's say if the right pop-up comes. Okay. In that case, we tell the user that app is not opening due to no internet, and there is a poor network connection due to, we are basically giving him a reason, and then we are also giving him an option to retry. Okay. Also, always be polite in the instances when you identify that user has done some mistake. Okay. So for example, when a Mac crashes, or any error comes on Mac, they always start with an apology. Okay. So be always polite in cases of mistakes. Okay. Next, what we'll do is we'll go through some of the laws which we generally see in the design world, which again helps us in improving usability. Okay. So one of them is a Fitts law. So what Fitts law says is, let's say if you want to hit a particular button on the app, okay, the larger the size of the button and the smaller the distance of the button from either your finger or your cursor, the lesser time or more effective it will be for the user to click that button, for example. I'm giving an example of a button. It can be any other type of action also. Okay. So, for example, here in Mac, what happens is whenever you are using any particular software, the the menu bar of the software comes on the extreme edge. Okay. So what happens is whenever user now the call to action for the user is very large. Okay. So he can easily go to the edge and click on it. Okay. However, what happens in Windows is there is a different this thing itself, where the user has the menu bar a bit below, where the user has to consciously go and then click on that particular button. Okay, so basically, when your size of the hitting is infinite, the edge basically it becomes the time to reach or perform that actions become minimum. For example, here the edge of the screen. Okay, now the next is steering law. In steering law, what we basically say is, for clicking a button, you are performing, you are asking the user to perform some particular action. Let's say there is a menu bar with that button. Then in that case, the time to steer through that menu to get to a particular option will be more than that which is already there in the forefront. Okay, so basically, if you want to open an existing file, you will have to hover over this paint and then go to the existing file. So going to an existing file here will take more time compared to opening the paint itself. Okay, now what how this law can be useful is, always try to understand what is the at every screen, what is the major objective that the user wants to achieve. Okay, so always keep the primary call to actions upfront so that user can click on them directly. You can hide the secondary call to actions or secondary workflows behind any steering. Okay, so one other example which gives the same thing is a Higgs law. In Higgs law, we say that the more option you give to the user, the more time the user will take to think or to identify which among these options I want to click on. Okay, so here, for example, you club all the sort bys together instead of putting all the sort bys here, saying sort by name, sort by kind, sort by date, last open. Instead of making this a very huge menu, you group all the sort bys together, and you know that on this screen through data, let's say you know that the primary call to action for the user is mostly either get info or open or create a new folder. You keep them upfront and you push the other the secondary actions which the user might not use very frequently behind a steer. Okay, the next is Weber's law. So Weber's law is states that if you are doing some small increments in any particular in any particular what we can say is brightness or color scheme, then ratio between the difference of let's take an example here. Ratio between the difference of these two colors will be constant to be the minimum difference between these two colors and these two colors, the intensity, the minimum difference in their intensity will be constant to be understood by the human eye. Okay, so this concept is used in mostly graphical user interfaces, where let's say in PowerPoint or in Google Slides you want to select among these shades. So you are not confused that these two are the same colors. You can see the differences between these two. Okay, and similarly, when you are trying to increase or decrease the volume of your headset, okay, at that time only with each increment or decrement, you can understand what is the difference that one click of increment or decrement has created. Okay, so uh, that difference should be meaningful for the user and it should be constant along the user's action items. If you increase it one by one, that increment should happen one by one, and if you decrease one by one, it should happen similarly linearly. The next is Miller's law. So what Miller's law says is, at a particular point of time in a short-term memory, there are on an average 7 items. It can be plus minus 2 on the basis of each individual, which a user can keep in their mind. Okay, so now again, two things here. One, how we apply Miller law is, again, we keep primary call to actions always on the discoverable place of in for the customer, and we hide the secondary call to actions by either making them less emphasized or making them clubbed together in some particular drop down, or there can be many other ways through which we can do that. Second, uh, if let's say a use case of compare which we have here, let's say in this particular use case, customer is trying to compare between different mobile phones. One of the attribute of comparison could be the specifications of camera, let's say. Okay. Now, as per the as per the Miller law, what it says is, at a point of time, customer can remember at most seven, or keep at most seven of these attributes, seven different values of uh, seven different values of basically so in that case we need to restrict through our system itself. We need to put a constraint in our system itself, where the customer doesn't add more than 7 items to be compared through our app itself, which will make our if we allow him to compare more than 7 items, it will make our app not it will decrease the effectiveness of our app basically, because he will have to put more time to understand and differentiate between those particular attributes, instead of doing them in a proper way. Okay, so for example, here we restricted it only till only 4 products. We don't even go up to 7 products. Okay, now let's. So this was a part where we were talking about usability concepts. Uh, the next section we have on design thinking. So design thinking is a process as per where we can, if we are given a problem statement, how to think about that problem statement and then try to solve it. Okay. So as a product manager and as a designer, as both of these, your main task is to identify the root cause of the problems the users are facing. Okay, and then come to a solution. We should always keep in mind that we are not directly jumping from problem to a solution. We are always steering through problem. What is the root cause of the problem? What solutions can help us in eliminating those root causes or solving for those root causes? Okay, so this is a general 6-step process, and it is very iterative. You can go from one step to another step and come back to the previous step from any point of time. Okay. Now, the first step is empathize. So, whenever you are given a problem statement, what you need to do is you need to first identify the context. Do some secondary research about that problem statement. Try to identify who are the users who are solving this problem. Uh, try to do primary research, interview those users, perform some surveys online, do focus group discussions with them, do ethnographic researches. Ethnographic researches means, so you are one of the ways you are observing how the user is using the particular product which is already existing, or using a competitor product which workflow you are trying to improve. Okay, so you try to empathize with the user. You try to do these through primary and secondary research. Then you try to write down your notes and try to club them together. Okay, this is the process which we call as affinity diagram. All the outputs you get from the research, you try to write down, let's say in sticky notes, and then you try to create themes from those. You try to club them in some meaningful structure and create some themes from those. Like here, this orange boxes are the themes which we have created from the yellow individual findings during our primary and secondary research. Okay. Now you through these themes, you will have an Uber level idea of what exactly is the problem which the user is facing. Now, once you were all doing the primary research and secondary research, you will identify that there are multiple segments in those users itself. Okay. So you need to identify those segments. Maybe some users are price oriented, some users are service oriented. Okay. You need to create these type of segments, and then you need to create an empathy map for each of these segments. Okay. Now in the empathy map, you try to write what the user is thinking and feeling while using the product or while being in that environment. Okay. What are the things he sees while using the product or while being in the environment? What are the things which he says, and what are the things which he says but doesn't do, but he doesn't says and do? Both can happen. Okay. Things which he is hearing maybe from background while using the product or while being in that environment. Okay. So at the same point, you also write the what are the pain points of the user and the gains. Gains is basically what are the goals of that user for which he's in that particular environment, or he's using that particular product itself. Okay. Now let's take an example of PUBG as an app. It is a gaming platform, and many times users used to sit together and play with each other. Okay. Now, uh, in when you say about PUBG, or a user who is playing regularly with, let's say, in a hostel room with his friends, at that point, what are the things he is seeing? He's seeing people are sitting around, and everyone is constantly eyed in their phones and playing the game. Okay. People are saying something, but they might do the opposite to defeat you, or they are doing some tricks. The opposite team is doing some tricks to convey a different message to you than what they will actually do in the game. Okay. The things, the type of strategies which you are hearing from other team, from your team. Okay. What are the pain points which the customer identifies during PUBG? Let's say one of the customers says, "Yeah, I don't have a good weapon to kill our opponents." Okay. So one feature from this could be have some in-app purchases, uh, allow the user to purchase the weapons, or try make him make other way could be to make him do some things in the app so that he levels up and get those weapons itself. So there can be multiple ways to solve for these pain points. So don't directly jump to the solution. Try to identify different routes to which we can reach to the solution. Okay. And goal is something which we will always keep in mind. Okay. Now, once we have the empathy maps of all the user segments, identify which is the user segment which we are solving for, and summarize the empathy map in a persona. Okay. The customer segments can be for which you are creating persona can be one, two, three. It depends on your needs and depends on the product. It depends on the problem statement you are solving for. Okay. But in the customer persona, always try to identify what is the context, demographic and demographical context your customer is in. What are the motivations of the customer? What are the goals of the customer? What are the pain points or frustrations? And if there are any limitations which the customer has. For example, if let's say uh, if you are designing something for blind, then a limitation would be that you need to design something which is either has which either which responds to senses which are other than sight, like touch, voice, those kind of things. Okay. If you're designing for some people who are in very remote villages, then technology would become a constraint. Okay. So those type of constraints you can put in this section. For example, in this place, they have put personality and technology as constraints, and they have put brands also as constraints, like customer prefers to buy from premier brands like Nike. Okay. Now the next thing is, once you have the customer persona you want to target, for each customer persona we need to identify a customer experience map. Okay. So customer experience map is basically you write down the whole customer journey. You try to identify that in each phase of the customer journey, what is the goal of the customer, what are the touch points the customer might have in the workflow, and what are the pain points, and what are the pain points of that customer in that particular set of user journey. Okay. And this user journey needs to be end to end. By end to end I mean, let's give an example of a food ordering app. The customer journey doesn't stop when a order is delivered to the customer. Okay. The customer journey stops when the customer has finished his food, because when the customer is eating his food, he can again come back to app and give a review that the food is spoiled. You can't forget that part of the customer journey. Okay. So keep in mind that the experience map covers the customer journey from end to end. Once you have the customer journey in mind, once you also, there is one more thing, sorry, it might be that the problem you are trying to solve is only, let's say, in this phase of the customer journey and not in the whole customer journey. So that also you will identify through the customer journey itself. Okay. So you will try to you will identify what are the phases in the customer journey for which you will be solving. Once you have the customer persona in mind, once you have the exact problem in mind, what you try to do is, now while you are creating a customer journey, you when you get the problems, you also try to drill down and identify the root causes of the problem during that particular step in the customer journey. Then you also have the problems there, you also have the users you are solving for. Then what you do is you create a very concise problem statement which you are solving for. This will be very helpful for you, because when you are thinking of solutions, you don't think of random solutions. So whenever, let's say, you thought of some 10 solutions, you see that you take one solution at a time, you come back to your problem statement and see, is the solution in alignment to my problem statement? If yes, then you come back to your customer, sorry, persona. You see that, if is that solution aligned to my customer persona, is that solution helping me to solve the goals which I have written in my persona? Is that solution helping me to solve the pain point which I have written in the persona? Is this solution in alignment with the constraints which I have written in the customer persona? Okay. So always write a very concise problem statement while you are following this process. The next step is you ideate what can be the features or what can be the things the user would want to solve the problem. Okay. So this is basically a brainstorming process to identify what are the solutions which you can come up for the root causes of the problems which you have identified here. Now, one of the template of it is, as a whatever persona of user you are targeting, what do you want to achieve, so that why you want to achieve. Okay. So you write all these user stories, and then for these user stories, you try to ideate those ideate those solutions. Let's say you, again, it is a ideation is a very divergence and convergence type of exercise. You openly think and ideate as many solutions as possible. It can be any dumb solution also. Don't keep a constraint on anything. Okay. While you have, let's say, you are exhausted now, you said that I have 10 solutions, I can't think more. If I get more, I'll note them down later. Okay. At that point, as I told earlier, you pick each solution at a time, you map it with your customer persona and with your problem statement, and see, is this solution uh, worth giving a shot. Okay. After doing that exercise, you will basically come up with a limited set of solutions for which you feel comfortable that these will help in solving the customer journey. Okay. One of let's say you came up from of those 10 solutions, you identified 3 solutions, okay, which will surely solve customers pain points and help him achieve the goal. Now if you have bandwidth, it is good that it will be great if you can implement all the 3 solutions and do some kind of analysis on the user. Let's say do a A/B testing to see which solution works best for the customer. Or if you don't have that much of time spent, or implementation cost is very high, what you can do is you can do some kind of bug analysis, which is basically you write all the 3 solutions here in the columns. You define certain criterias on which you want to grade these solutions. Again, those criterias will be uh, on the basis of the team you have, and on the basis of the time span you have to solve the problem, on the basis of what is actually the problem. Okay. And also what is the type of user you are catering to. Okay. All these things will come up in the criteria. Different aspects of these things will come up in the criteria, and then with each criteria you will mark some pointers, let's say 1 to 5, to each of these solutions, and then in the total you will see which of these is making most sense and or the implementation your team can do. While you have identified that this is the solution, I'll go forward. You will create a detailed task flow. Let's say a customer opens the app, he will click on this, then he'll go to this page. Then on this page, he can click on 3 buttons. If he click on this button, he'll go to this particular screen. Those kind of task flows you will create, so which will help you go create a user journey for the customer on your product. And then what you will do is, after creating this task flow, you will create an information architecture which will basically try to see how this task flow is how this task flow is already fitting in your existing app, by seeing what are the global elements in your existing app and where these particular task flows can fit to allow the user navigate to, let's say, this new feature or improvement in the existing feature. Okay. This also keeps in mind that so in app there is always that some features are primary features, some features are secondary features. Okay. So it should not happen that you are launching a new feature and every time you launch a new feature you make that feature as a primary feature of the app. Yeah, that should not always happen, right? So keeping an information architecture uh, keeps that global elements and information hierarchy in your mind, that the main goal of the app is this, and through to achieve that goal these are the sub goals, and this is the importance of each of the sub goals, and they should be coming in this phase of the app. It should not happen that a particular thing is coming in the very front to the user, which ideally should have come in, let's say, uh, third or fourth interaction. Okay. So those kind of uh, pitfalls is something which information architecture helps you to uh, get away from. One of the ways of creating information architecture is doing card sorting. So while doing the card sorting, what happens is you basically it is a co-working type of experience with the users. You give you write the names of these particular fields, home, browse, and what are the options in the home, for example, which you are thinking to write them in a card and give them to the user, and ask them to create group them logically. Okay. Once they group them logically, then you create a structure of that logical grouping, and you end up with having an information architecture. This is one of the ways of creating an information architecture. Next, when you have the user's workflow and information architecture in your mind, do a wireframing. As a product manager, you don't need to be very efficient with what I can say is with a very high fidelity type of interfaces, just do a very rough wireframing. It can be a paper, it can be on the paper, or it can be on web using some of the tools which I mentioned here, like Adobe XD or Figma or Exure RP or Balsamic. You can use any of these, or you can just create on paper. This helps your development team and design team to understand what you are trying to achieve. So the task flows which you have prepared, try to convert them into wireframes and present those to your designers and developers. Your designers would be more efficient in improving those wireframes and making them into uh, 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 deployable or high fidelity prototypes basically. You can also do testing during the process itself. During the testing, what happens is you can do two type of testing. One is formative testing. Formative testing is basically in each step of the whole process you test with the user that you are going in the correct direction or not. And summative testing is once you have drilled down on a particular solution and then you have created wireframes and everything, then you come to the user and tell him ki, I'm trying to solve through this. Is it solving your problem or not? Are you able to achieve a goal? So these are the two types of testing. One is a system usability scale. It is a usability measurement tool which usability.gov has created. It is basically you ask a customer to play with the app. You tell them, for example, you tell them that in Amazon, open the Amazon app and buy a pillow. You tell them this, and you allow them to buy a pillow as per their need, and you observe them. And then in the end, this usability.gov has created a questionnaire which has 10 questions. All are objective based on a scale of 5. They ask the user to fill those questions, and they have again a formula to create a usability score as per the answers which the customers have given. And then you get a usability score out of -100 to +100. A zero is the neutral usability. Anything below zero means that the product is not usable at all. There is a threshold also. I am not able to recall what is the exact value of that threshold. Let's say it is 64%. If your usability score is above 64%, then the product you have built is said to be very highly usable. The last thing is implementation. This will basically be handled by the designers, developers, and testers. As a product manager, you will also work as testers at many points in the implementation phase. So this was the whole design thinking process where you basically what you do is you try to identify what is the context of the problem, what is the context the user is in. You define what exactly is the problem, what exactly are our users. Then you ideate some solutions for those. Then you of those solutions you evaluate which are worthy to go forward. You create prototypes for those, you test those solutions, and then you implement those. Okay, so design this is the whole design thinking process. The last part of the presentation, I'll try to cover it within the 10 minutes, is heuristic evaluation. So let's say you are given a system, okay? You are given a product. Let's say you are given Swiggy app. Uh, now you are asked to evaluate Swiggy app. Is it good or bad? Okay. In what aspects it is good, in what aspects is it bad? Bad, sorry. So these are few directional pointers which will help you to identify if a particular app is good or bad. So what you can do is you can go through each of these steps and see are there clues of each of these steps in the app or not. I'll give some examples of each of the clue. The first is visibility of system status. So basically, wherever a user is in the system, or wherever the user is interacting the product, let's say type gmail.com. Okay, it is not that the Google will directly open Gmail. It takes some time to load the Gmail itself. So they put a loading bar there. so that it doesn't feel, you know that your emails are getting loaded, and it doesn't feel that your system has hanged or something has happened, or you are clueless what is happening. Similarly, when you are uploading any file to the drive, you you get to see the progress bar here. Whenever a file has been uploaded, at that time you get a toast that says that 2 files have been uploaded. So they make you understand what is the status of the system in which you are currently in. The second is match between the system and the real world. So it is very similar to the metaphors which we had talked earlier. That, for example, in Mac, we know that trash is something where we throw our garbage. Okay, so Mac uses this particular item as a symbol of trash to show that something is there in the garbage. If your trash is empty, actually this bucket is also empty. That's how bookmarks in our physical books, right? So whenever you are browsing through different websites or web pages, you can bookmark the items. Bookmark as a feature is something which browsers give you to bookmark the web pages, just like you can bookmark the pages in a real book. The third is user control and freedom. Okay, so it is again something like undo and redo, which we had talked earlier. That in cases of either slips or lapses or mistake, the user should have an option to exit, to have an emergency exit from that state. Okay, so for example, I was writing any particular doc. I wrote a paragraph, and then I identified that no, I should not submit this. Then I have an option to undo and remove that paragraph at all. Okay. Similarly, one very interesting feature with Gmail launched was we had seen that many users wrote the email and by mistake, let's say incompletely wrote the email and sent it. Okay, or just after clicking the submit button, you identify that some of the people who should have been in the mail are not there. So Google, within for some seconds after the mail has been sent, Google gives you an option to undo, and clicking on undo will actually allow you to undo. The next thing is consistency and standards. It is a very good tool. Again, in learnability aspects, we had seen that we provide affordances and metaphors to the users and keep the systems consistent. That reduces the learning curve, increases the memorability, and uh, also increases the efficiency of the product. Okay, so for example, here if the user has used any one of the products in the MS suite, he could easily use the other products because the menu bar and the actions are very similar, and the structure in these systems in these different softwares is also very similar. Error prevention is again which we had discussed earlier. The user to solve for the error if it comes, and try to eliminate the scenarios in your product itself where error is coming. So first priority will always be that eliminate the scenario itself where the error is coming. In case there is some areas where it is still prone to error, always give a meaningful message to the customer through which he can bypass that error. Recognition rather than recall is again some thing which we had seen earlier. Uh, it is again you can see in the drop in the auto suggest of Google search. You don't need to write San Francisco or let's say whatever you want to search. It helps you to identify what actually you are searching for, right? You don't need to recall that I was searching for this and then you have to press an enter. While you are typing, they try to identify that what you were searching for, you would have been searching for, and then they provide some suggestions to you that you can recognize among these what you are searching for. That again increases the efficiency of the product. flexibility and efficiency of use. So, as I said, there can be multiple customer segments for which your product is the product is catering to. So, let's say for an Excel, let's say there can be two customer segments. One is a very new user, and one is a very advanced user. So, for a new user, what he'll do is he'll rely on the menu bar, okay, to do all his tasks. Okay, but as an advanced user, I need to be very fast while using the Excel sheet. Okay, so for me, for being fast, as we have already seen in particular menu option and then steering to other menu options within that menu option will take time. For a expert user to increase his efficiency, one of the best ways which Excel does is Excel has shortcuts. Okay, so you press these shortcuts through your keyboards and you are done. Okay, you don't need to move your cursor everywhere to your menu. So basically, through uh, you cater to each type of audience or each type of customer segment which could have been using your product. The next thing is aesthetics and minimalistic design. So keep all the irrelevant things away from the design itself so that the user doesn't perform any mistake. One, the user doesn't forget what goal he was trying to achieve or what steps he needs to go through to meet that goal. For example, in the Google's login screen, they have only these two fields and this particular section in focus so that user doesn't forget what he was doing or doesn't deviate itself himself. This again we have discussed earlier that help users recognize, diagnose, and recover from error. Uh, Always show the meaningful error messages. The last thing is help and documentation. Always have a help section or a guide for the user in your system in your product. This helps the user to uh, one reduce the learnability curve by going through the help section, improve the efficiency and self confidence that I can use the product by myself. Also, once the user has used the product by themselves, it increases the chances of retaining the user. Okay. Yeah, that's all from my side today. Thanks, guys, for being very patient. We are open to questions if you guys have any questions.
Thank you so much for the session, sir. I think they've put the questions in the chat box.
Sure. Do you want, how do you want to go about it? You will identify the question and then we can answer, or how?
Yeah, I can sort out the questions.
Sure, sure, sure.
So one of the question that was there was a difference between experience map and user flow. Are both of them same or different?
So there is a overlap. User flow is a part of the experience map. Hello, am I audible? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. User flow is a part of the experience map. Experience map covers user flow plus in each step of the user flow, what are the goals of the customer, what are the pain points of the customer, what we could do to solve the pain points at that particular stage of the user flow.
Uh, the next question is: are there any limitations for ethnographic research? Is it only for digital products or hardware too?
No, we can do it for hardware also. So, for example, Nestle did a very good user research in the stores itself. The coffee pouches which they have for Nestle, they silently observe the users who go to the superstores and buy coffee. So they silently observe what are the different parameters the user is looking for in the coffee's packet. What are they directly going to Nestle, or they are browsing through other brands first and then going to Nestle, or they are not even going to Nestle and directly going to other brands. So Then they do customer segmentation and try to find different findings of each of those customer segments as per the competition.
Another question is, when I use metaphors of others, does it lead to copyright issues from those who did it first?
Matlab it depends on product to product, first of all. Like for example, save button is something which is very generically used, right? Or undo and redo buttons are something, refresh button is something which is very generically used. Okay. So for these things, copyright issues don't come. Copyright issues will come if you directly copy the icons from, just giving an example of digital product. You directly take let's say you downloaded an icon from Flat Icon. It is a website which generally designers used to go through the icons. You download it from there and then directly use it in your product. Okay, in that case the copyright will come because you are using Flat Icon. In Flat Icon, some particular designer would have uploaded that particular icon. You can create similar icons which are by yourself, or use some open libraries like glyph icons which Google has prepared. There are many other open libraries also which you can use.
What are the real life uses of web?
Sorry, can you come again? What is
the importance of Weber's law in daily life?
okay? So Weber law के लिए ना, I'll just give you an example. Um, Weber law के लिए, yeah. So let's say you are increasing or decreasing the volume of your mobile phone. Okay. So let's say you use the hard keys which are on the side of your phone, right, to increase or decrease the clicker. With each click of the up icon, okay, up button, you can identify that the volume has increased. The volume has actually increased. Okay, so that is one of the example or the application, that if you, it should not happen that clicking on that plus, user would not have understood that the volume is actually increasing or not. So that delta which I was talking about, that the minimum identifiable difference, that will be constant even if the volume is low or the volume is high.
I think those are all the questions. So, thank you so much for being with us, sir. I thank you on behalf of ESL Guwahati and all the audience present in the session for sharing such great words of wisdom. I wish you all the best for your future and an incredible journey ahead.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, guys. And thank you for bearing with me for 1 hour on a Saturday evening. Have a nice weekend.